After a busy free agency, who's actually on the roster now and who's fighting for a job?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. We're 3 days a week right now. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be kind of looking at the state of the roster as the Sharks have made a bevy of moves this offseason, bringing in new players, shipping out some old players, and kind of looking at who I think are locks to make the roster in both the forward and defensive group, and who I think are going to be fighting for their jobs, or at least fighting for a job. And then an opening night, what I think, 23-man roster, plus way too early to look at the lines that I would put together, which are probably going to be way too much fun. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So Mike Grier, pretty busy this offseason as he's added a bunch of new players to the San Jose Sharks roster. We got, a bunch of new forwards added. The defense has been completely overhauled compared to what we saw last year. And of course, that's going to leave some potential guys who maybe thought their jobs were secured and maybe didn't. That's plenty of potential job opportunities. So we're going to start by looking at the forward group here and players who I think are locks to make the roster. So these guys, I would be shocked to be honest, if they weren't on the opening night roster, not including injury reasons, right? But guys who I believe should be opening night players for the San Jose Sharks. So these are alphabetical order by last name. It's not by who most likely, et cetera, et cetera. It's just alphabetical order by last name. Macklin, Celebrini. I think something horribly wrong. Like, just cancel this season of Macklin Celebrini isn't on the opening night roster for the Sharks. William Eklund, newcomer Adam Gaudette, Barkley, Goodrow, Colin Graff. Yes, Colin Graff, I feel, is a lock with the way that he played last year and his skill set and the trust that he has earned from Ryan Reaves and the coaching staff. Like, I think Colin Graff is 100% an NHL player and should be on the NHL roster opening night. Philip Kurashev, who the Sharks signed this offseason. Jeff Skinner, who the Sharks signed on Friday. Will Smith, Tyler Toffoli, and Alex Wenberg. So I don't think there's like any major, surprises with any of those guys. Especially when you look at like contracts kind of play a role into it as well. Like Barkley, Goodrow, we know that I don't think he on the ice fulfills what his contract is getting paid, but we know that Mike Grier and the team value him and what he brings in the locker room and the leadership, et cetera, et cetera. And that $3.6 million contract isn't going anywhere, right? And the Sharks are not going to be able to move that, especially with his, I think it's 15-team no trade clause. And if you try to send him to the AHL, like it's Barkley, Goodrow is going to be on the roster, right? And young players like Celebrini and Will Smith and guys who were, I think Celebrini, you could argue, was the best player on the Sharks by the end of the last year. Will Smith, who had an excellent second half to the season. Tyler Toffoli, like none of those guys, I think, really shock you for players who are like, something terribly wrong would have gone wrong for these guys not to be on the roster, right? And I think Wenberg is going to, have a pretty big role, as we'll discuss here in a little bit. So the more interesting is players who I think are fighting for their jobs or fighting for a job, I would say. So there's 10 forwards right there, right? So that leaves 2 spots that actually need to be like fill the lines, and then potentially 2 other spots if you go 14 and 7, which spoiler is how I kind of set up my opening night roster. So that's a total of 4 jobs that might be open, that are fighting. And there's a lot of dudes on this list. So Igor Afanasiev is a player who, went to the KHL last year, has come back, guy who's going to be definitely fighting for a job. Ethan Cardwell, a guy who played some NHL games last year, would definitely fill that bottom 6, which I think is where most of the jobs are going to be potentially available. Like Ethan Cardwell is a player who I think could fill one of those roles. Igor Chernyshov is a guy who, has shown a lot in a short amount of time. I still think he is destined for the Barracuda, at least to start the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is in the mix. Ty Dellandrea, like out of these guys, like he feels the safest because of kind of what he does and plays on the penalty kill and like his center wing flexibility. But still, like I think there's definitely competition for him to potentially lose his job as a 4th line, bottom 6 type of player. And his contract is not very big. Like he's a guy who I do believe is going to have to be fighting for his job. Carl Grundstrom is, as we talked about last week, of winners and losers. Carl Grundstrom, big loser when it comes because of now all the competition in here. 4 players that are going to be, especially in that bottom 6, 4th line type of role. Grundstrom is a guy who definitely needs to come in here and try to have a really nice camp because, again, there's just a lot of names on here, this list now. Daniel Gushin, guy who's going to be, very much a last chance opportunity. And I wouldn't be surprised if Gushin is not here by the end of training camp, just because there may not be a realistic spot for him and with the Sharks or the Sharks organization. Cam Lund, the guy who played kind of middle 6 minutes for the Sharks at the end of the last year, I still think he should be on the Colin Graff path to success of go play half the season with the Barracuda, kind of round out your game a little bit, and then we'll see you in the second half of the year. But, is a guy who can score, and the Sharks definitely need more guys who can score on the roster. So Michael Misa, of course, the 2nd overall pick, is definitely a player who is going to be worthy of trying to fill a roster spot. And as we talked about on the deep dive with Misa last week, of a guy who I think is a really clean prospect and a guy who can kind of earn a role. And especially if you want to put him on the Will Smith path to success of, development days in the first half of the season and kind of being really careful with his ice time and then take the training wheels off the second half. Like we have proof that concept works and is successful. And Misa is a very talented player who could be kind of in that weird, it's too good to go back in the OHL, we don't really know what to do with him type of position. So Quentin Musty, another player, a young player, is going to be fighting for a job here as well. I still think spending some time in the AHL isn't the worst thing in the world for Quentin Musty, but again, a name who will be fighting for an NHL job right here. And the upside with Musty is very high. So like you could definitely see him potentially sticking around as well. Zach Ostapchuk, for a player, again, kind of in that fighting with, he was a guy like Ty Dellandrea in the bottom 6, especially a guy who plays center. I know the end of the season with the Sharks and / Barracuda wasn't the most, didn't leave you feeling all warm and fuzzy with how he played. But if you apply the Zetterlund rule to Zach Ostapchuk, would you be surprised if he came out and had a really nice season with the Sharks, just because now these kind of processed the trade and been with the team? Like, wouldn't surprise you as well. And then Ryan Reaves, who, of course, Mike Greer wanted everyone to feel taller, adds the deterrent factor, et cetera, but not a guarantee that I think he makes the opening night roster, and especially with his limited kind of skill set and what he brings, other than, yes, he's a deterrent and helps protect the young children. On ice, like there's a lot of other guys who do do a lot of more things than he does and just have provide a lot more roster flexibility. So there's a ton of dudes there fighting for 4 spots realistically again, that's if you go 14 and 7, so 14 forwards and 7 defensemen with 2 scratches from the forward group. Like, that's a lot of dudes trying to fight for not a lot of spots. And yes, the Sharks, there's going to be a lot of competition and stuff, but you kind of feel like those 10 guys are pretty much a lock to make the roster unless something tragic were to happen. So we're going to look at the defense here. And while not as, still a lot of what you feel like are locks and not as many maybe open spots, still some competition and stuff. And plus we'll look at the goaltending here. So we'll get to that in just 1 second. You just realized your business need to hire someone like yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your posts at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If you've ever been in a spot where you need to hire like yesterday, the pressure's on. Every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring. Indeed is all you need. All right. I do want to thank you, of course, for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe. Even though it's the off season, we're down to 3 episodes a week. That doesn't mean we're still not putting out good shows, right? We're going to be back on Tuesday night, Wednesday. We're going to be doing the Josh Ravensbergen deep dive. We're going to be looking at him. We're going to be talking about Celebrini here soon. Sam Dickinson, spoiler, we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. But plenty of great stuff coming up at Locked On Sharks. Make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts, and of course you can watch on YouTube as well. All right, so we switch over to the blue line, or hardliners if you're certain people, looking at players who, again, guys who I think are locks to make the roster, and if they are on the roster, if they're actually on the roster, and it does sound like Mike Greer is pretty much done unless something big comes up, but wanted to look at the blue line here and how the Sharks kind of attack this. So Mario Ferraro, of course, right? John Klingberg, who you just went out and signed. Nick Leddy, who you just went out and acquired via waivers. Timothy Liljegren. Shakir Mukhamadullin, I did put an asterisk with him because he is coming off shoulder injury, and he does sound like he's going to be ready for training camp, et cetera, but still, and just in case maybe he's not quite 100%, maybe he starts the season on iron. But again, from the sound of it, it sounds very similar to like the William Eklund injury that he had a couple seasons ago in the AHL, and Eklund was ready to go by the training camp. So not worried about him. I guess I could have put an asterisk also on William Eklund, but again, from the sound of it, like William Eklund's already training and everything like that. So not worried about that. And then Dimitri Orlov, who these Sharks signed to a 2-year deal this offseason. So again, like as long as these guys are still with the organization, I would be shocked if they are not on the opening night roster. Again, assuming everyone is fully healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And even Mukhamadullin, who's coming off the season-ending shoulder surgery, would be like, I think he's absolute lock. We've heard my career gush about Mukhamadullin and like how the way he's playing, and wants to have Mukhamadullin as a full-time NHL player. I think Mukhamadullin, unless he comes into camp and is like still bothered by the injury, and they want to give him almost like rehab time in the AHL, and for a guy like Mukhamadullin, who's going to be gunning for a big long-term type of contract, I think he's going like using the summer to be 100% ready and be an NHL guy. And I think his play is more than warrant for him to be an NHL player this offseason. So who's fighting for jobs? And there's a lot of like defensemen that you could potentially look at, but I want to really kind of realistic guys here, and players who I think could be fighting for an NHL job. So you have Luca Cagnoni, who almost made the team out of camp last year and was one of the last cuts and played very well. And again, like I think Cagnoni, I still think Cagnoni starts the season in the AHL, especially as we'll talk about here in a minute with the guy in a minute. But Cagnoni's done a lot of great work in the AHL, and soon I think is going to be ready to be a full-time NHLer. I just don't know if I think Sharks are going to give some other guys some potential opportunity here. So Vincent Desharnais, who of course the Sharks acquired last year, he's big, 6'7", right-handed, which is nice, but I don't think feels like a player who you're 100% sure is going to be on the roster, and you could, I think, potentially waive him and get him down to the AHL if you needed to. Of course, Sam Dickinson, who it does sound like the Sharks are going to give every runway and opportunity to play in the NHL this year, at least get his 9 games before having to decide whether to send him back to the OHL. Unfortunately with Dickinson, who is kind of stuck in that no man's land of NHL or OHL, now it's really frustrating because of the new rule that's going to be coming out where the teams will be able to pick one 19-year-old player in the CHL to play in the AHL. Sam Dickinson would be a perfect person for that, but the rule doesn't enact until 26-27 season, so it doesn't help Dickinson right now. So again, I do think Dickinson is going to be given every opportunity, and I think he makes the Sharks opening night roster. So and then Jack Thompson, who the RFA right now, still trying to we'll get a contract with him at some point, not worried about that, but I think is another right-handed shot, a guy who's played well in the NHL during his limited time. I guess he played half the season, and is a guy who might be ready to push for a full-time NHL job here, and wouldn't be surprised if he's playing every night by the end of the season as well. So there's a lot of intrigue, and I do feel like Dickinson's going to have the inside track, especially as a top 11 pick and a guy who the Sharks are very invested that he plays very well and can earn an NHL job. I think he's a guy who's going to be the betting favorite, I would say, out of that group to make the team. So switch over to the crease here. Yaroslav Askarov, Alex Nedeljkovic, both of these guys are your NHL goalies. Barracuda-wise, so we have Gabe Carrier, Matt Davis, who is asterisks with him because he is on an AHL deal only, just like Gabe Carrier started the season last year. Wouldn't be surprised if Davis earned an NHL contract at some point. And Jacob Skarek, Carrier and Skarek are going to be your 1-2 in net for the Barracuda, and Matt Davis will probably come up here eventually, but I wouldn't be surprised if Davis starts the season. My expectation is Askarov and Nedeljkovic in the NHL, Carrier, Skarek in the AHL, and then Davis starts in the ECHL, and then if somebody gets hurt, Davis kind of bumps up to the AHL here type of scenario. So I don't think there's really much surprise there. Like Ravensburgen is clearly going back to the WHL, and some of the other like Kirsch and some of the other guys like they're clearly going to be where they're at and not, I think, ready to make a push for a professional job at this point. And I think it's pretty clear 1 through 5 where the Sharks goalie organization's at. So, and like I kind of like where the goalie or like his group is at right now. I think there's plenty of upside, and I think there's also some safety in it. And I know Nedeljkovic didn't maybe post the greatest numbers the past couple seasons, but I still think like I wouldn't be surprised if he'd had a Mackenzie Blackwood type rebound. I'm not saying he's going to be like posting the same stuff Mackenzie Blackwood did, but there's a reason like he was a Calder finalist and he played very well. And yes, very good Carolina Hurricanes teams, but I think there's still enough there, and I think he's a really solid 1B type of player for the Sharks. And I think the world of Askarov, and I think Askarov's going to be really good. And we talked about last week where kind of a realistic season for Askarov might look like, but again, like I have high hopes / expectations for this goaltending. I think it's going to be much better than what we saw, especially post Mackenzie Blackwood last year, post Mackenzie Blackwood trade, because I just think there's much higher upside compared to what we saw between Gorgiev and some of the other guys who were on the roster then. So, but yeah. So who makes the team? That's what we're going to try to figure out here in just 1 second. If you want to take advantage of these summer sports that are in full swing, whether it's baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach, or you can do both. You can be at the beach and also get in on the game. So if you're watching Summer League, you might as well dive 100% in because FanDuel's got you covered for Summer League as well. Take the under on points because Summer League's super fun, but just take the under. You'll probably feel pretty good about it. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, before we finish up, of course, I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off season. We're still got you covered over there at Locked On NHL 5 days a week, bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, who makes the team? So again, I did 14 and 7. So 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goalies gets me to 23. If I did my math correct, I'm pretty sure I did my math correct. 14 plus 7 is 21. 21 plus 2, 23. So here is my projected roster, way too early, middle of July roster. So Macklin, Celebrini, duh. William Macklin, duh. Ty Dellandrea, who, again, I think he's the safest among those bottom 6 guys because of the flexibility where he can play center, he can play wing, he can play on the PK, he can kind of fill a lot of different roles. Adam Gaudette, who I think is going to have a really nice role for the Sharks. Barkley Goodrow, again, as I talked about, Barkley Goodrow's not going anywhere. Colin Graff, who I do think is a player who should be a full-time NHL player. And again, he provides so many different things. I think Colin Graff is there. Carl Grundstrom, I think he holds off some of these younger guys, but he's like your first man. Like he's your last man in like the bubble thing, right? You're like last team in, last team out. Like he's your last team in type of player. Philip Kurashev, Michael Misa. And again, that's probably me just wish casting a little bit because I want to watch Michael Misa on the San Jose Sharks this year because I think he's going to be really fun. Ryan Reaves because of the intangibles and off ice and locker room stuff, and he's going to sit in the press box. Jeff Skinner, Will Smith, Tyler Toffoli, Alex Wenberg. So again, so kind of those last 4 guys in. Dellandrea, who I feel like would be the safest out of all those guys. Grundstrom, Michael Misa, and Ryan Reaves. So those are your like last 4 in players. If I had to kind of guess your like last 4 out from those guys, I would assume it would be like Chernyshov, Ostapchuk would probably be like your 2 big ones there. Maybe Cardwell. And then like, I think that's kind of where you're looking at right there, and probably Gushin as well. But again, I'm still on I don't know if Gushin gets through training camp, to be honest. I think he probably gets traded to. So defensively, where are we at? Sam Dickinson. Mario Ferraro, John Klingberg, Nick Leddy, Timothy Liljegren, Shakir Mukhamadullin, Dimitri Orlov, and then your goalies, Askarov and Nedeljkovic. Again, no surprise with the goalies. Dickinson, I think the Sharks, again, if it's close with anybody, like if it's a tie, they're going to give Dickinson the edge to at least see what happens, right? And especially with his runway and being 19. And also with the, like, they're stuck with him in a position of like you either have to be in the NHL or you have to go back and play in the OHL. I wonder what would happen if he goes back to the O. We might explore that here pretty soon. But if he goes back to the O, if maybe London trades him because they could get a whole mess of stuff for him. And yes, I know London's a very good team that's going to try to win at all costs, but who knows? But anyway, I think Dickinson makes it. So Dickinson's like your last man in. I think your last guy out is Vincent Desharnais. Like, I mean, all those guys, Kenyoni, Desharnais, and Thompson, like realistically could be in the mix for, like, it wouldn't be surprised me if any of those guys made the team, because I think all those guys, especially Kenyoni and Thompson, I think both those guys are going to be pushing for NHL jobs here sooner rather than later. But again, if it's close, and especially with both those guys who can go back to the AHL, if it's close, I think Dickinson gets the nod there, and I think it will be close. So the way too early lines, middle of July lines here. So Macklin, Celebrini, Toffoli, line 1, the 70s line. Skinner, Will Smith, Kurashev. So I really like this line because it gives a veteran presence in Skinner. Kurashev, who's kind of, played a fair amount of games, gives Will Smith some balance between those guys. And I think Skinner is a really great scoring option. Kurashev, who's played with a guy like Bedard, a young guy like Bedard, and thrived with that. I feel like that's puts Will Smith in a really nice position to succeed as a second line center. And yes, I'm going to have Will Smith as a second line center until basically that job is taken away from him, because I think we've heard it from Mike Greer. They want him to play center this year. And I think having him as your second line center puts him in a position to succeed better than playing him on your third line center. But anyway, third line, I actually kind of really like this third line too. Michael Misa, Alex Wenberg, Adam Gaudette. Again, putting Misa in a position to succeed with two veteran guys like Wenberg and Gaudette. Gaudette, who can do a little bit of everything, can add some scoring touch. Wenberg, who can kind of be the safety net on the line. And Misa, who, starting him on the wing, just like if we're going to do the Will Smith thing, we're going to do the Will Smith thing. And Will Smith started last year on the third line wing. I could definitely see them do the exact same thing as well. And then the fourth line of Barkley, Goodrow, Ty Dellandrea, and Colin Graff. Poor Colin Graff, but you know what? Like, at least he adds a little bit of pop to that line. So with my healthy scratches being Reaves and then Grundstrom, like if and then if Misa is out, like you could bump Graff up to the third line and put Grundstrom or Reaves in on the fourth line. That's kind of my thinking along that lines. Defensively, Orlov, Klingberg is my top pairing. Ferraro, Shakir Mukhamadullin, who can play both sides. Sam Dickinson with Nick Leddy, who can also play both sides, puts Dickinson in a nice position to succeed on the third pair. You have a really good veteran in Leddy who can help move the puck as well. And then Liljegren would be your healthy scratch right now. If Liljegren comes in, and then you can, figure things out from there. And maybe if you don't have Dickinson in, Leddy moves to the left, Liljegren comes in on the right side there to play with him. That would be kind of how I do it, with Askarov and Nedeljkovic playing there. So, like, you can squint at that, and it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, it's not the worst group in the world there. Like, I do think, like, Skinner is going to be a really nice addition for the Sharks, and especially if on that, like, that second line of Skinner, like, I really like that middle. Yes, like, Macklin, Celebrini, Toffoli is really fun. But, like, maybe I'm kind of taking that line for granted. But that middle six, I feel like not the worst thing I've ever looked at, when especially compared to what we've looked at for recent Sharks years. And if Will Smith can can be your second line center. And I think it does a good job of balancing out where young players are by putting some veterans around them. Like especially like Smith, right? You have Skinner and you have Kurashev on that line there. Probably not the most defensively responsible line, but that line needs to go out and score goals. That's what that line is for, right? And you can match the Celebrini, like we know Celebrini and Eklund are going to be good defensively. Like they can match and take those hard lineups and hopefully freeze up that second line to go score a little bit more. And then the Wenberg line, like I think that line's got enough versatility, and I think it's got enough scoring pop with Gaudette and Misa, and Wenberg can kind of be that safety net for them. So, we'll see. Again, I think people who think this team is going to be way worse than it was last year, like, I don't know, man. I think there's like literal, like legitimate improvements. And yes, there's a lot of hopes and ifs, and this guy can do this, right? Especially in the defensive group. But I think there's enough there where you to see some tangible improvements anyway. So that's gonna be it for me today. We'll be back Tuesday night, Wednesday. We're gonna be doing the Josh Ravensbergen deep dives. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts, and of course you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until Tuesday, Wednesday. Bye, friends.